So away day on rest. Okay, and if you're wondering kind of why rest, well, kind of following the members survey that we did at the back end of last year, the elders were thinking about the work that there is to be done in the church, how hard, how tiring it is, and you guys who are doing it. And we were wondering, do we need to be working smarter? Do we need to be stopping doing certain things and cutting back on the workload because we feel stretched? But as we talked and prayed, it felt that there was perhaps another side to our struggle that we could consider. Work is just half the picture. Rest is the other. And so the question we asked was, how can hard-working people who are kind of pouring themselves into the life and work of this church, as well as usually doing busy, demanding day jobs and caring for your families and faithfully doing a whole load of other responsibilities, how can we be helped to rest, to find true renewal and refreshment, a strength and energy that comes in and through the Lord Jesus Christ and his gospel? And we're not thinking about that just as a way to keep going with the works and make sure we're at the grind and carrying on. It's a genuine way that we think we can care for you, and how each of us as Christians and as a church we can grow so that knowing Jesus is more real and relevant and practical and makes a greater difference in our lives. And really that is the aim of today. How do we as hard-working people rest well? How does Jesus bring true rest, refreshment and renewal to both our body and our soul? How does this make a practical difference on the ground in our busy everyday lives? And our sessions are going to be interactive. You're sitting around tables, so there's going to be lots of discussion around tables and whole group kind of feedback. And our structure is firstly, we're going to be thinking about the Bible's story of rest, which I've kind of outlined on the screen where we're going, before finishing in the second session, thinking about our story of rest. And so let's dive straight in, because the Bible's story of rest begins at creation with us as people made to rest like God, with God, and ultimately in God. So if you've got a Bible, there's a few on the table, open it up to Genesis chapter 2 and verses 2 and 3, where the story of rest really begins in the Bible. And this is the end of the 7 days of creation poem that the Bible starts with. And Genesis 2 and verses 2 and 3 say, "By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done." So God does his work of creation, and then he rests. And he blessed. He highlights this time of rest, showing really that we're not just made to work, we were made to rest like God. We're made for more than work. We're made for more than this world. We are made for God. And it was a chance to stop and to stand back and to appreciate and enjoy the good things that God had made. That rest brings thankfulness. God, of course, didn't stop his work out of tiredness or the need to break from his work because, his creative juices are dried up or something like that. He rested in satisfaction in appreciation, to have the chance to take in and enjoy all that he had made, the creation with all its variety and beauty, and in particular, his most favoured and special creatures, Adam and Eve. And he took pleasure and delight in it all. And we're to rest like God, giving us space and time to take delight and be thankful and appreciative of the good things in this world that God has made. And as the pinnacle of that, taking time to delight in relationships and the people that God has made. And we're not passive in this, kind of sitting back and doing nothing. It seems that the very best times in the paradise garden of Eden was in the cool of the day, after the work had been done that day, when God would come and walk and talk with Adam and Eve. Now, we only seem to find out about that happening after it's all been spoilt. But we're told in Genesis 3 and verse 8 that the Lord God comes for what seems to be his regular walk through the garden to be with Adam and Eve. But of course, because they had by that time eaten the forbidden fruit, they hide in their sin and in their shame. And this shows us that God resting is more than a pattern and practice to follow so that we rest like God. Surely this is an invitation, an opportunity to rest with God, to stop our work, to be with him in the cool of the day or for the whole of the rest of a rest day. And again, not necessarily as individuals, but as couples, as it is here. And no doubt the intention was that as the population grew, everyone would have been involved in that, whether in families, friendship groups, or other ways, not in any formal kind of get-together, but just having God around, being present with him in whatever it is that we're doing. So rest in the paradise garden seems to be more than kind of more active and social than perhaps many of the passive kind of solo pursuits that, I don't know, certainly I seem to kind of opt for by default, watching TV, listening to music, stamp collecting, things like that. I'm not kind of knocking those, but just wondering whether those are the most restful, refreshing, renewing forms of rest. And that's just a question for now that I'll leave hanging. But there seems to be another message too in God resting and us resting. We follow his lead because he is in charge and he is taking care of us. Because, of course, while God rests, he never stops his care and control of all things. And he's inviting us to come aside from our cares and our responsibilities, trusting and having confidence in him that he will keep everything going. Rest is an act of trust and committing ourselves into God's care. But we rest in God because of God, because of who he is. He's the creator, and we're the creature. Or perhaps a more relational image, he's the father. We are his child. He's the big, infinite one. We're small, finite, limited people. And that's how and who we are and were, even before the human race fell into sin. We are creatures who in a childlike way are to turn to our Father and rest and come to him. So rest in paradise. It looked like resting like God, taking our time to enjoy and be satisfied with the good things God has done, particularly other people, It looks like resting with God and taking time, particularly to enjoy Him and be satisfied in Him, individually and collectively. And resting in God. Taking time as creatures in a very childlike way, entrusting ourselves into His fatherly care and control of all things. Resting in Him because of who He is. And so I just want us to kind of reflect on that kind of beginnings of the Bible story of rest. And on your tables, just have a think about, what is true rest? What makes rest restful and refreshing and renewing? And then, why do we need rest? Why did God introduce this? Why did He think it was a good idea that we rest? Okay, so just have a go at discussing those. So about 7-8 minutes, and then I'd really appreciate some feedback and your thoughts, and we're trying to interact with it a bit afterwards as a whole group. What is true rest? What makes it restful and kind of refreshing and renewing? Any thoughts? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
A couple of free beers,
Okay.
with your friends, obviously not my own. I do go like that, but yeah.
What's refreshing about that?
Well, the fact is, if you've got to have a relationship with people we go every week, but it's, you don't have any of those hang-ups you get when you don't know someone, whether or not you're about to torpedo this relationship by saying something stupid. But we say stupid stuff all the time, which is great. And wildly offensive things as well. But so far we're all right. But that's very restful because you're not frightened, are you?
So there's an element of enjoying something good that God has made, the beer, but also enjoying company and.
So it's the particular quality of it is that you're not having to, also because you know each other extremely well. You probably do know some things that would be stupid to say, but there's an ability to be able to speak truth to each other that is helpful, and also be able to speak, things that are difficult or whatever.
It's really helpful. Cool. Other thoughts?
We looked at probably the way around. I thought it's quite interesting. So why would rather than what is rest, which we got to a bit, but why do we need it? And we talk about when things in life that become negative, they're all consuming, and even affects kind of sleep and relationships and stuff like that. You need, you get to the point. You can often get to the point of this can't carry on, and you just have to get rest. And so then what is that? And so what do you?
We'll start there. Yeah. Cool. So, it's stuck. Can you flick it onto the next one? Will it have turned itself off?
Give me a second.
Okay, so we're going to move on to think about the effect that the human race's fall from perfection has had on rest, because it has ruined rest. Actually, it kind of makes rest even more important, but we have this scratch that we don't know how to itch, because rest makes us, the fall makes us restless. We are restless. We are those, who have this itch to rest, but we don't know how to scratch and satisfy that, as those separated from God, living in a broken world as broken people. And the fall, of course, is recorded in Genesis chapter 3. So if you've got your Bible, have a look at that. Adam and Eve, you will be familiar with the story, no doubt. They're enticed by the snake, Satan, to eat from that one tree that God had told them not to. And as a result of that disobedience, God sentences them in chapter 2 and verses 16 to 19, sorry, chapter 3 and verses 16 to 19, he sentences them to hard labor. Okay? Hard labor that leads to painful, restless lives. Literally for Eve, she will have hard labor in childbirth. What was meant to lead to kind of family bliss becomes painful and dangerous, and leads to families and relationships that just seem to be broken and dysfunctional. And Adam, his sentence of hard labor was his work, what was meant to be fulfilling and fruitful and would lead to satisfying rest, becomes hard and frustrating, leaving him tired and physically and emotionally exhausted. And of course, with this, there's also the sentence of spiritual death that would ultimately lead to an even more painful and restless eternal death. In verse 24, God drives them out of the paradise garden, showing that they were separated in this life from God and the joy of his rest, and would ultimately, unless things changed, be separated from God and the joy of his rest beyond this life for all eternity. So this sentence of hard labor affecting kind of family life, work life, and this even more devastating sentence of spiritual death and separation from God ruins rest. And it makes us restless. The pleasures and satisfaction of being in close relationships, of doing creative, fulfilling work, that is fractured and broken. There's loss and rejection and enemies and death. There's the physical and emotional pain and exhaustion that so often occurs within families, within our work. And we all by birth but are spiritually cut off from the ultimate source of rest and joy, God himself. And so that rest in paradise, as we were to rest like God and with God and in God, is lost. And yet, as I say, we still itch for rest in a way that we don't know how to scratch and we don't know how to satisfy. And so in our search for rest, we tend to twist rest and kind of end up with escapism, kind of entertaining ourselves, amusing ourselves as we seek rest and renewal and refreshment. And we try to escape the boredom and pain of life in this fallen world. Now, I was writing this and thinking, this is exactly what I'm doing as I'm preparing this kind of session. When my work became frustrating and I was tired and I wanted a break, I would pick up my phone, went on to YouTube, and I think I was watching some comedy clips that I liked from Would I Lie to You? Just to kind of, 2 or 3 minute pick me up and escape, just a bit of amusement, a bit of entertainment to make me feel a bit better, give me a little laugh. Of course, that sometimes spirals into longer breaks as I click onto the next and then the next and the next clip. But that's what we tend to do, isn't it? We have this kind of escapism and entertaining ourselves in a very passive way. And I guess, is that the most healthy rest and refreshment? Is that really going to renew and kind of give us satisfaction in body and soul? It might just for a moment. But, amusement, escapism, entertainment, these are activities that we like because they tend to use as little exertion from us as possible, whether that is in our mind or our body. They're effortless and, as I say, perhaps provide momentary relief and kind of freedom from the pain or the boredom. But does that really equate to rest? So that's what I'd like us to discuss next on our tables in our groups. What makes us tend to think that rest should be effortless? And why might this ruin rest? And how might it be unhelpful to think that all our work has to be done before we rest? Okay? There you go. Have 10 minutes to think about those. And they're kind of two different things, although they are related. So. Between the eyes, like rest shouldn't be effortless. Or, oh no! Okay, that ruins all my activities. Kind of take a coffee break. We did kind of start a bit late. I think we probably are going on a bit as well, but no, that's the way it is. Okay, so the Bible story of rest, thankfully, doesn't end with the fall. Thankfully, the Bible story doesn't end with the fall. Sin and the fall has ruined rest. We've become restless. But God, in the Old Testament, he begins to restore rest primarily through regulating and introducing a kind of regular rhythm of rest, set patterns for each day, each week, and regular times throughout the year, and indeed every number of years. And this begins kind of in Genesis chapter 1, with a pattern being set down in that poem of the 7 days of creation. For each day, there was an evening and there was a morning. There was nighttime and daytime. And the pattern became that at night we rest, in the day we work. Now, obviously, some people work night shifts and so sleep in the day, but that's the general pattern that kind of even our body clocks recognize. Again, we were made to rest. An average adult needs 7 to 9 hours sleep a night. That's nearly a third of our lives. And God thought that was good. And one of the reasons God thinks that's good is because he knew that actually it would take a daily act of faith, of entrusting ourselves to him to sleep, to rest. We can sleep because he doesn't sleep. Kind of my favourite verse growing up was Psalm 4 and verse 8, and I kind of wrote it out and pinned it on above my bed. It says, "In peace I will lie down and sleep, for you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety." In a broken, fallen world, we are exercising faith. We are needing God to keep us safe as we sleep. While we're oblivious and powerless to dangers, he is not. And that's the pattern with rest, and it's seen particularly there in sleep. We are entrusting ourselves, we are committing ourselves to God. In work, we stop our work, we're not being productive, and so we're resting, trusting God. But then, as already seen in Genesis 2, God put in place a weekly day of rest. And in the Old Testament, this became a key day to be reminded of and to live out our true rest, body and soul. As God told the people in the Ten Commandments, recorded in Exodus chapter 20, 6 days they were to be full of labor, this frustrating, tiring, hard labor. But the seventh day was for rest, the Garden of Eden kind of rest, as we rest like God and with God and in God. But in addition to that, God instructed the people of Israel to keep other Sabbaths, other rest days throughout the year. The Jewish calendar included 7 annual feasts, totaling 20 to 30 days of holy days, of holidays, public holidays, each year. And the people needed this rest. They were commanded to keep and observe this rest, again, in an Eden-like way, where they would rest like God and with God and in God. It's a blessing that most employers today similarly offer us 20 to 30 days holiday a year, because when we work for 6 days, or perhaps most of us work for 5 days for our employer, even with our weekly day of rest, we benefit from this additional, occasional periods of rest, especially if we're learning and growing to use those rests truly for the refreshment and renewal of our body and soul. And actually, God built into the Jewish calendars more occasional rest periods as well. Leviticus 25 records that every 7 years there was to be a Sabbath year. And that was for the land to rest, so that the fields could be left fallow and renewed and refreshed. And then at the end of 49 years, 7 times 7, so as they entered the 50th year, there was the year of Jubilee, where there was to be complete reset and a refreshing across the country. Slaves were set free and returned to their original owners. The land, was returned to their original owners. Debts were written off. There was this rhythm of rest, daily, weekly, yearly, even every 7 and every 50 years. Regular reminders and the beginnings of the way that God was restoring rest, all pointing to our Eden-like need for rest like God and with God and in God, rest for body and soul. So a couple more questions to discuss, and then we'll have our coffee break. So what can make it hard to rest? What is the biggest threat to rest in your life? And why do you need to plan rest? How might you do that? Let's have your thoughts then, and then we can have a cup of coffee. What can make it hard to rest? What's some of the biggest threats to rest? Okay, so we're tracing the Bible story of rest, and we've reached the New Testament, where God continues to restore rest, ultimately through a relationship with Jesus, making it possible again to rest like God and with God and in God. Now, I love Jesus' words in Matthew 11 and verses 28 to 30, really well-known kind of invitation for us to come and rest. If you want to look it up, it's on page 977 in the Church Bible. Matthew 11, 28 to 30 says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Rest is found as we come to Christ, as we're connected, as we're yoked up with him. It's like two oxen harnessed together, where the lead one takes the strain and does the heavy lifting, doing all of the work really, and we just follow and learn from him. In that we see and experience him with his gentle, humble heart, ever dependable, ever kind. It is that relationship in which we find rest for body and soul. Because knowing that in life, knowing Jesus in life, knowing him in death, knowing we're yoked up to him, makes all the difference. So we've been talking about the threats and dangers to rest, just in the last discussion there. And there were so many things that were coming at us, so many pressures, the voices, expectations of others, the pressures from work and family and church. And yet these things kind of resonate within us. And actually, it is our hearts that ruin rest. So, we spoke a bit about anxiety. Being anxious about work the next day, or the expectations of others. And being yoked to Jesus can undo that ruining of rest, knowing that he is present and near so that we are not alone, knowing he is watchful so we don't have to be kind of constantly hypervigilant, knowing he's powerful so we can be weak. Knowing he provides so we don't always have to be striving and performing and impressing and worrying what people think. That changes us. That refreshes, renews us. It begins to wean us off kind of our escapism and thinking that we just need a quick pick-me-up and some kind of fix. We can rest in him. And we see the impact of that in our bodies, in our souls, as we're less tense, as we're more restful, knowing him with us. Knowing he's watching, knowing he's providing, knowing he has performed so we don't need to. Or a slightly kind of, more serious situation, someone who is abused. How easily do they become restless and not able to find peace, not able to settle, often opting for escapism. And yet, knowing we're yoked to Jesus, knowing that he is that one who witnesses and is more angry at wrongdoing than even we are, that begins to relieve that awful sense that he wasn't there and he doesn't care. That knowing he is just, that he will see all wrongs righted, that helps us to rest in his determination to punish and to see that justice will be done. Knowing he's compassionate, experiencing that as the most vulnerable and those at great risk. Having him come close, having him comfort, having him sustain us. Again, we see the impact of this, the true rest that is found in Jesus. And when it's found, you can sense that relief and refreshment and renewal in body and soul. Or to those of us who are guilty, who feel our wrong and see the hurt and destruction that our actions have caused. Again, knowing that we are yoked to Jesus, this one who has taken our punishment and paid the price for what we've done. It quietens our soul. It appeases our conscience. Knowing that we are washed, that we are clean in his sight, that in him we're not defined by whatever it is that we've done, but we have a new identity and we belong to him as his beloved child. That knowing that we have his Spirit living within us, teaching us how to live out this new identity and to be the child of God we truly are. Again, this is the source of ultimate rest and release and renewal and refreshment that really does impact life and every moment. It's not that we kind of separate and segregate these things out. Moment by moment, we're living in a relationship with Jesus where we can know peace and rest even in the most troubled circumstances and persistent sins and horrible sufferings or deadly persecutions or attacks. We can know rest from trying to control our world, of trying to keep up appearances and an image, trying to hide our guilt and shame, of facing life and fears on our own, of battling inner despair or outward disability. It's never full, it's never total kind of peace and refreshment because we remain broken people living in a broken world, and our nearness and closeness to Jesus in relationship ebbs and flows. But it's in him, as we're close to him, as we're assured of being yoked to him, knowing his gentle and lowly heart, his easy yoke and his light burden, that we find rest for our souls and our bodies. So a couple of questions again, just to get you thinking about this, and then we'll have some feedback again. So, how has Jesus begun to bring rest in an area where your heart is restless or your life is in turmoil? And if you're not sensing that, how might he do that? In which areas of our lives do we find hardest to rest and entrust to Jesus? And why might that be? So have a few minutes again just to chat about that. To bring rest in areas of your heart that are restless or your life that is into. So, so we're tracing the Bible story of rest, and this is where it kind of all leads to, really. The world to come and anticipating eternal rest. It began in creation. With us as people being made to rest like God and with God and ultimately in God. Like God, we rest by taking time out to enjoy and be satisfied with the good things that God has made, particularly other people. That's that taking pleasure in, taking delight in. We do that with God as that invitation comes to rest with him and take time to particularly enjoy him and be satisfied in him individually and collectively. And we do it as those in God in the way we've kind of just been talking about, as those who are creatures who are childlike and turn and trust ourselves to him as our Father in his care and under his control, resting in him because of who he is. But then the fall, ruins rest. We become restless, having this itch for rest that we don't know how to scratch and satisfy, that we try to do so through amusement or entertainment or escapism and all these kind of passive ways where we've just turned in on ourselves and just want things for ourselves rather than actively pursuing others and delighting in the things that are in the good things that God has made. And so we saw in the Old Testament, God begins to restore rest through these regular rhythms of rest. And we've just been thinking how actually that culminates in the New Testament, with rest being restored ultimately through a relationship with Jesus, making it possible again to rest like God and with God and in God. And this all leads to, because everything is leading to the world to come, where God will complete the story of rest by giving eternal rest, bringing a restored humanity into his presence to enjoy unending, all-satisfying rest for body and soul. That's our hope. That's what we anticipate. In Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 9, we're assured that there remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. We experience a measure of rest in relationship with Jesus now, and it is very real, and it is true rest. We can know rest of body and soul in Jesus, but it is just a taste. It is a first fruit of the great harvest of rest that is going to come. We will have heard Jesus' commendation. Well done, good and faithful servant. Come and share your master's happiness, his joy. There will be that lavish marriage banquet, symbolizing some of the best things about rest as we enjoy good food and fine wine in good company with laughter and music and dancing and celebration, with the groom center stage, as we, his bride, anticipate an eternity in his presence as the recipients of his undying, unfavored love and care. It will be a place where all anxiety will be gone, where all wrongs are going to be righted, where all guilt and shame will be forgotten forever. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old things and the old order has passed away. Nothing's going to disturb or interrupt this unending, all-satisfying rest. That's where we're heading, and we can experience the beginnings of that now, primarily in relationship with Jesus. So as we kind of draw things to a close, we've been thinking about the Bible story of rest, and so I want us to just get practical and think about our story of rest. And so just a few things. We're going to be thinking back to those rhythms of rest, but remember, the relational element, because, we're not under law, we are under grace. But those rhythms of rest are important. So we're going to think about our story of rest, our daily rest, our weekly rest, our occasional rest. So let's begin with sleep, kind of sleep patterns, sleep problems. This is just something to stimulate some conversation on your table and get you thinking about, okay, what's important about sleep. So imagine that you're with a group of friends who are excitedly planning how they could sleep less and work more. Okay? So for them, they want to train themselves to only sleep 4 hours a night so that they can work for Jesus for 20 hours a day. Okay? What might you say to them? Or more importantly, what might the Bible say to them? And if you feel able, then let that lead into kind of discussion around your kind of sleep patterns. How does and could Jesus help you rest healthily? Okay, so have a go at that, have a think about that. I won't be taking kind of feedback on these things.